If you're in Scotland, watch out for this bus. It's actually a mobile art gallery. One of the artists featured is Will Maclean.
I go a lot to the West Highlands and I think about it a lot. It's constantly in my work. I don't actually live there. I feel like it's being my home. And I will go back and live there when I'm rich and famous. Like every other exile wants to go back to his own place. I belong to a coastal culture and have been brought up at sea and by the sea and amongst people who are involved in the sea, and I have a strong feeling of, in my own father's community, I have a strong feeling of place there. I'm in the Lowlands because I have a good teaching job in the school, and because I'm close to Edinburgh, where I can go and look at exhibitions. I realise that if anybody wants to understand fully what drives me, then there's a lot of background that one would need to know about. One of my mother's cousins wanted to build a new boat, and he had been looking at the way that herring gulls sat in the water and rode the water. So he looked long and hard at the seagulls before he had the design of his boat drawn up. I just took the idea and extended it into the bird itself, the head and the wings and the feet and rudders, wings and sails, and the head and the wheelhouse. The big piece with the wooden apron is called the Symbols of Survival, and the original idea that I got was from a survival kit which my uncle gave to me when I was a child. It unrolled into a long apron which had pouches in it, and in the pouches there were various survival aids like harpoons and fishing drags and so forth. The piece with the hooks in it is called Nostalgic Locker. I've always enjoyed the feeling of sitting in the forecastles of the fishing boats. When I was a very small child, it was a great thrill for me to go and sit with my uncles and cousins in this boat. So I made that piece to try and recreate the feeling of security and happiness that I felt in the locker. Superstition and magic is part of the old Highland communities that I know. Some of the pieces I've made have been almost like little shrines or little totems to various fish gods and fish or bird images that are just a complete invention on my part. Working on fishing boats, you can see that your life depends upon elemental things. Your livelihood, in fact, your very life depends upon elemental forces, famine, wind, rain. A Hebridean spirit boat with figures in the boat which were symbolic of various aspects of the culture, of the society. An image of the church, its place in the society, a gannet, and a fisherman or a hunter, a woman, a skate. Well, I don't think one can look at the history of the Northwest Highlands and seriously look at it and look at the way that it's been handled, and look at the way that the area has been depopulated and the culture's been destroyed, I don't think you can look at it really properly and not have some kind of political feelings about it, hereditary feelings of anger, indignation, or whatever you like to call it, about the way that the families in these areas were cleared off the land in order to make way for sheep. Some of the villages that I go to have an enormous feeling of desolation and isolation. And there are always bits of, very poignant little bits of memorabilia or things lying around, old glasses, old Bibles, old bits of medals, things that were very meaningful to people. If the pieces are successful, then they will reflect my feelings. I have a strong feeling of place there. I feel like it's being my home. And I will go back and live there sometime. Once upon a time, far out in the wide sea, right down underneath, there lived a mermaid. Each day, one of the little mermaids decided to go and swim up to the top of the water and see what she could see. What did you see?
Princess.
The prince fell out of the boat and he was swept onto the shore. And he was lying there and the mermaid came. And the mermaid lifted him and took him away to a safe place.
Art wasn't my first choice of career. I'd always thought I'd follow my family footsteps and become, like all male members of my family, go to sea and become a sailor. I left school at 16 and went away to the Merchant Navy School and went to sea. And I spent some years at sea, but unfortunately failed my eyesight test, so I had to come ashore. And really after that, art chose me. Themes in my work have been largely over the years returning to the sea, to fishing in particular, and to the social history of the Highlands and the political history of the Highlands. If I go visit anywhere special, I take a big workbook with me and I make drawings and collages, which I either do on the spot, or quite often the collages are left to work on at a later time in the studio. I was trained as a painter and I did a lot of printmaking at college. Then when I began school teaching, I began to develop a process of construction and making, which I've developed ever since. All the tools I have are actually tools I use. They're hand tools because apart from the bandsaw and the jigsaw, I really prefer to use hand tools. Even handling wooden tools is much more in tune with the work, I think. I don't think the meaning of my work has changed really. In essence, it always has been, there has been a narrative in my work, and the process has changed slightly in that my earlier work was very controlled and assembled, whereas my later work seems to be more a process of layering, a process of adding and subtracting and changing. The materials that I use are largely water-based, so I use acrylic medium and I use pigments. I mix them with PVA medium and put various hardeners and various fillers in. I work on various pieces at the same time. This one here began as a found object. This is part of a boat's bottom board, and it began as a two-dimensional object and then sort of took its own form three-dimensionally. These small works here are used by a process of casting. It's the same casting, but it's been broken down and then layered into it. And these casts can be, they can be worked on, polished. They take paint quite nicely too. So I use that. This is the metal cast. So there's quite a lot of casting in the process. St Kilda has been really a sort of construct in my mind for a lot of years. As a child, I spent some time in North Uist, and on a very clear night, my uncle used to run us out in his car to the western seaboard to look at St Kilda peering over the horizon. So it had a sort of fabulous quality about it, and I suppose it began my kind of strange fascination with St Kilda that's gone on really through my life. Having read virtually all there is to read about it, I just find the whole St Kilda saga very exciting and very mysterious. Some people feel that my work has a national focus and a cultural and a narrative focus that they find difficult to understand. But I hope that when I make work, I make it to the highest possible standard of craft and composition. So I hope that people will enjoy it visually, and if they tend to try and find, trace the narrative back into it, or put their own narrative to it, that they'll be rewarded by that as well.